They sent out the wedding invitations, gold embossed, elegant, and forgot one thing: the groom's mother. Me. No name, no mention, not even a call. But the wedding was happening on my property, and I wasn't about to be erased. Not this time. The envelope was thick, embossed, expensive. But my name wasn't on it. Not on the front. Not inside. Not anywhere. It arrived on a Tuesday mid-morning, while I was still in my dressing gown, standing in the kitchen with one slipper missing and the kettle hissing behind me. I remember because the mailbox clanged just as I reached for the tea caddy, a sharp metal slap against silence. I didn't think much of it at first. It looked like one of those high-end real estate flyers people send when a neighbor lists their home. The kind that pretends to be a personal letter but smells of marketing. But then I saw the gold edging, the weight of it. The return address. None. Just a zip code from the city. And the handwriting elegant, scripted, clearly printed by a machine that had been trained to impress. Inside, I found what I wasn't looking for. A wedding invitation. Not from my son, Michael. No, from Mr. and Mrs. Hale. Printed in fine calligraphy across the top. Gregory and Camille Hale. Request the honor of your presence at the wedding of their children. Not our children. Not Michael Marsh, my boy. The one I raised with scraped hands and tired bones. Just their children. I scanned the card again. Nowhere did it say Esther Marsh. Nowhere did it say mother of the groom. Nowhere did it say, you are welcome. You are wanted. You belong. The invitation might as well have been a billboard. A glossy, gold-framed billboard that screamed, you are no one here. I sat down at the kitchen table, the card trembling slightly between my fingers. Not from age, though the arthritis had started to creep into my joints lately, but from something colder. A dread so still, it didn't even need to shout. The kettle clicked off behind me. I didn't pour the water. I read the names again. Camille Hale. Of course, she always knew how to orchestrate things just so. Polished, mannered, the kind of woman who could host a fundraiser, fire a staff member, and choose wine pairings in the same breath without breaking eye contact. Her perfection had always unnerved me. When Michael brought her home for the first time, I remember the way she looked at the curtains in my living room. Not with disdain, no. That would have been easier to bear. With quiet appraisal, as if mentally replacing them before she'd even sat down. Still, I had smiled. I had offered tea. I had folded myself small, so she could feel large. And now? Now she was sending invitations for a wedding on my son's behalf. A wedding that apparently didn't include his mother, not even in name. There wasn't even a call beforehand. Not a word. Just this announcement. Formal. Final. Like a decision had already been made. And all that was left was postage. I turned the card over, checked the envelope again. No personal note. No scribbled, can't wait to see you. Not even an RSVP card addressed to me. The enclosed card had been pre-filled with the names Mr. and Mrs. Hale, just waiting for a check mark. My hands stayed still. My breath shallowed. After everything, after losing Thomas, after raising Michael on one salary, one spine, and an aching heart, this was how it came back to me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That comes later. First comes something heavier. Recognition. This wasn't a mistake. It was choreography. Camille's kind, smooth, elegant, absolute. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me. And somehow, that was worse. Sometimes, I think about the night shifts more than I should. The way the lights at the packaging plant buzzed overhead. How the machines never stopped humming. I was 29 when Thomas died. Michael was 7. a boy still learning how to tie his own shoelaces. And suddenly, I was both mother and father, cook and mechanic, disciplinarian and bedtime storyteller. We lived in a modest two-bedroom house off Baldwin Road in Auburn Hills. Our Subaru was rusting at the bottom edges, but it ran when coaxed, like an old friend reluctant to disappoint. I used to call it the second parent, because it never failed to start even when I did. I stitched together Halloween costumes from leftover fabric scraps. One year, he wanted to be a robot. I glued old cassette tape reels to a cardboard box and painted it silver with house paint. He beamed when he saw it, walked through the school hallway with such pride. You'd think I'd built him a spaceship. It was us against the world. Our bond wasn't spoken, it was lived. Pancakes on Sundays, snowball fights in the front yard, the two of us doing puzzles during power outages by candlelight, and then, slowly, like snow melting in spring, it began to shift. It began with a girl, Camille Hale. He met her during his first year at the firm. Marketing analyst, clean lines, clipped words, confidence that wore heels. The first time he brought her over, she handed me a wine bottle I couldn't pronounce and looked around the living room like it was a museum. Quaint, she'd said, with a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. I remember feeling like I had become a category in her mind, single mother, retired, emotionally cluttered. She never said anything unkind, but her silence was efficient. It trimmed me out of conversation like I was extra dialogue in a tight script. Michael started calling less. Visits became shorter. Sorry, Mom. Things are tight. Camille always had a work trip, or a deadline, or an allergy to something I'd made. I started sending cards to fill the silence. Sometimes gifts, little things. A book he once loved. A framed photo of the lake house. A hand-knitted scarf. One day, I visited their new townhouse in Birmingham. I left a small parcel near the hallway table, a ceramic ornament shaped like a lighthouse. He used to love them as a child. 3 weeks later, it was still there, still wrapped, still untouched. When I asked Camille about it, she smiled. Oh, she said, her voice like cut glass. We've been so busy. And in that moment, I knew. I was no longer Esther Marsh, mother of Michael. I was the woman who drops things off. A shadow, a reminder, a ghost still haunting the living room of a life that had moved on without me. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for 3 days before I picked up the phone. I wasn't avoiding it. Not exactly. But every time I looked at that thick, gold-lettered lie, a weight settled deeper in my chest. Like grief's quieter cousin familiar, but with sharper elbows. On the third evening, after feeding the cat and rinsing out my mug from morning tea I never drank, I finally reached for the phone. There was only one person I could call, one person who would understand without the need for explanation. Ruth Chandler. We'd been friends since before either of us had gray hair. She used to run the public library over in Rochester Hills. The kind of woman who organized her spices alphabetically, but wasn't above spiking her coffee when the mood required it. Sharp-tongued, sharper-minded, she picked up on the second ring. Esther Marsh, she said, like I was a chapter she'd been waiting to reread. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I got a wedding invitation. Silence on her end. Then, whose? Michael's. Another pause. And? It wasn't from him. It was from Camille's parents. That earned a snort. Of course it was. No mention of me. Not even a mother of the groom. Just Mr. and Mrs. Hale. Ruth exhaled slowly. Where's the wedding? I hesitated. The lake house. Now there was real silence. Not confusion, comprehension. She knew exactly what that meant. The one you and Thomas bought? I nodded before realizing she couldn't see me. Yes. She didn't miss a beat. Did you ever sign it over? The question landed like a stone in water. The ripples hit my ribs. I stood very still, hand clutching the edge of the counter. I don't think so. You'd know, she said crisply. Check your papers now. The old filing cabinet was in the hallway closet, beneath winter scarves and a rolled-up yoga mat I hadn't unrolled in 5 years. It groaned when I pulled it open. The folders inside smelled like dust and old intentions. Tax returns, birth certificates, report cards. Then, near the back, behind a manila envelope labeled House 1994, I found it. The deed. Not a copy. The original. Thomas's handwriting in the margins. And, beneath the notary stamp, 2 names. Thomas Marsh and Esther Marsh. Joint tenants, with right of survivorship. Thomas died in 2007, which meant the house was mine. Legally. Fully. Irrevocably. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, the way I used to when Michael built blanket forts and begged me to stay inside them longer than my back allowed. The paper trembled in my hands. They were planning a wedding on land that wasn't theirs. On land Camille had never even thanked me for. A house they had painted, redecorated, and locked me out of in silence. I wasn't just being forgotten anymore. I was being used. Not by accident, by assumption. They didn't think they had to ask, because they didn't think I'd say no. But now, I had something better than fury. I had the deed, and for the first time in years, I felt something settle in me. Not heavy, but sharp. Not grief. Not rage. Resolve. I called him just after lunch. The house was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the rustle of wind against the back windows. Outside, the leaves were beginning to curl at the edges, early signs of fall creeping in. The number was still in the old address book, the one with curling corners and smudged ink from years of spilled tea. Thomas Coe, Esquire, Estate and Property. He'd been our lawyer for almost 2 decades, ever since Thomas and I first bought the lake house. He had a calm voice, the kind that never rushed you but never wasted your time either. When the receptionist answered, I introduced myself. She asked me to hold, and then within a minute, that familiar warm tone came through. Mrs. Marsh, he said. It's been some time. It has, I replied softly. I'm calling about the property, our place, on Bay Ridge Lane. He didn't need much prompting. I told him about the wedding plans, the invitation, the omission, all of it. Not with bitterness, just the truth, laid out plainly, like a grocery list of betrayal. There was a pause on his end when I finished. Then, measured words. Well, from what you've described, Esther, if your name is still on the deed, and I believe it is, no one can legally host any private or commercial event there without your written consent. I closed my eyes for a moment. So they have no right, not without a lease or a transfer. Do you remember signing either? No, I said. I never did. Then it's yours and yours alone. He didn't press. He didn't advise revenge or legal drama. Just facts. Just clarity. Thank you, Thomas, I said. That's all I needed to know. If anything changes, you let me know. I promised I would, and I hung up the phone. The afternoon light had shifted across the kitchen floor. Pale, streaky gold across the linoleum. Everything looked the same. But inside me, something had changed. They thought I was irrelevant, a name to be skipped, a placeholder they'd quietly retired. But the house told another story. That night, after dinner, though I barely touched it, I took the invitation off the kitchen table. The envelope still smelled faintly of perfume, Something expensive and unnecessary. I turned it over, picked up my pen, and wrote across the front, in deliberate, clean script, "Return to sender. Addressee. Unknown. Not out of spite, but truth." Then I went to my closet and pulled out my overnight bag. Inside I placed, asterisk, my best cardigan, the navy one, with pearl buttons, asterisk, the simple pearl earrings Thomas gave me on our 20th anniversary, asterisk, my tea tin, the dented silver one he used to refill for me every winter, tucked now in a side pocket, like a blessing, asterisk. And finally, the deed. I didn't slam drawers or curse the air. I packed quietly, because I wasn't running away. I was going home. I arrived just before noon. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the edge of the long, winding drive. I didn't want them to see me yet. Not until I was ready. The lake shimmered through the trees, soft sunlight dappling the surface like scattered gold coins. It looked exactly as I remembered, and completely different, all at once. I parked beneath the old cedar, the one Thomas used to hang the bird feeder from in the winter. The feeder was gone now. Like everything else, chairs were being unfolded on the lawn. White, glossy, all in neat symmetrical rows. Ribbons fluttered in the breeze, lavender, of course. Camille never left things to chance. Florists moved with brisk efficiency across the porch, arranging centerpieces, adjusting placements. A man in a vest barked instructions into a headset. Vendors, planners, perfectionists. I didn't go to the house right away. I walked to the dock first. The wooden boards were new, freshly stained, sealed, sterile, the kind of renovation that erases memory with polish. But the lake? The lake hadn't changed. Still wide. Still patient. Still listening. I stood at the edge, hands in my coat pockets, and let the wind push against my shoulders. He cried the first time he touched a worm. I held the line while he learned not to flinch. Michael had been 10. Thomas showed him how to bait the hook. He couldn't stop gagging, said it felt like snot. We all laughed, one of those good, unfiltered laughs that echo long after they stop. He caught his first bluegill 20 minutes later. Held it like a trophy. I turned toward the house. She was there. Camille Hale, standing on the porch in slim black trousers and a crisp blouse, clipboard in hand. She was pointing at something floral, lips tight, voice clipped, as always. She hadn't noticed me. Not yet. I climbed the steps slowly, deliberately. She turned and froze, her eyes locked with mine. A flicker of something passed across her face. Surprise, irritation, calculation. Then it vanished, behind a thin-lipped smile. "Esther," she said carefully. "We weren't expecting—" I cut her off without raising my voice. "I can see that." Michael emerged from inside, holding a bundle of seating charts. When he saw me, he blinked, like I'd stepped out of a dream he wasn't ready for. "Mom," he said, "we thought you were okay with—" "You never asked," I said evenly. No rage, no tremble. I pulled the folded paper from my bag and handed it to Camille. She glanced at it, eyes scanning the heading. "This is the deed." "Yes," I replied. "And this," I unfolded another sheet, "a printed usage agreement, is what you'll need to sign if you want to proceed." She looked at Michael. "Is this really necessary?" I met her gaze. "I won't stop the wedding. But if my name is being excluded from everything, then this house, my house, will not be part of it." Camille opened her mouth to argue. I didn't give her the chance. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about respect. Something I've allowed to disappear for too long." She looked down at the papers. I didn't wait for permission. I stepped inside, The rehearsal dinner began at 6, but I arrived at 5:30. Not out of eagerness, God, no. But because I wanted time to see how they'd prepared the stage before the performance began. The Hale family had rented out the upper floor of an upscale restaurant near the lakeshore. All reclaimed wood, curated lighting, and menus printed on textured paper that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Camille's touch was everywhere. Floating candles, minimal floral arrangements, name tags, written in soft gray ink, everything color, coordinated like a wedding catalog spread. And then I saw mine. A place card. Handwritten, slightly crooked, slipped in between a waiter's station and the swinging door to the kitchen, near the service trays, near the staff, of course. It hadn't even been printed with the others, just scrawled Esther in a rushed hand. No last name, as if I were a late RSVP or an afterthought. Someone they hadn't expected, someone they hadn't wanted. I stood there for a moment. One heartbeat, then two. Then I picked it up, and I walked to the head table. It sat in the center of the room under soft pendant lighting. Large centerpiece of ivory hydrangeas. 4 chairs on one side for Camille's parents and her sister. 3 on the other. Michael, Camille, and 1 empty seat between them. I placed my card there, and I sat. No one stopped me, not even Camille. She saw, of course. She was across the room, pretending to check a floral arrangement, but her eyes flicked to me the moment I moved. Her mother Celeste, I think, let out the faintest gasp and whispered something behind a champagne flute. But Michael? He looked, and then looked away, which was worse. Dinner began with speeches, none of which mentioned me. Toasts to Camille's organization skills, to Gregory Hale's generosity, to the floral vendor who went above and beyond. I picked at my food. The duck was dry. Halfway through the meal, I heard it. Camille's voice, low, crisp, like a knife behind a napkin. She's going to ruin the aesthetic. She wasn't talking to me, but I was meant to hear it. I said nothing. My face didn't flinch. My hands stayed still on the linen. Let them arrange their flowers, I thought. I will arrange myself. After the meal, there were more toasts, more air kisses, more curated affection passed around like wine. When I returned to the guest room that night, I unpacked slowly. I took off my shoes, folded my cardigan neatly over the chair, and placed the small, framed copy of the deed beside the bed. Right there on the nightstand. It wasn't for protection. It was presence, a quiet reminder in a house that no longer used my name, but still stood on the foundation I helped build. I didn't need anyone to tell me I belonged there. The land had already said it. I wore the same navy blue dress I'd worn to Michael's college graduation, the one with the satin belt and the hem that fell just below my knees. It still fit, mostly. A little snug at the ribs, but it held me together. The pearl earrings glinted beneath my gray hair. Gifts from Thomas on our 20th anniversary. I remember he said, "These are for the years you wore silence like jewelry." I didn't understand him then. I do now. The guests began to settle just before 3. Rows of white chairs shimmered beneath strings of light wrapped around tree trunks. The lake stretched beyond, glassy and silent. I was seated in the front row, finally, though I suspected Camille had done it under protest. My name wasn't printed in the program, not under family, not under hosts. Just the Hales, front and center, as though I had nothing to do with any of this. The ceremony passed in a blur of silk and scripted vows. Camille walked down the aisle in a gown designed to impress. Michael stood tall, but he didn't look at me. Not once. They exchanged rings. They kissed. The crowd clapped. Not me. I sat still. Dinner followed beneath a white canopy on the lawn. There were soft string instruments, crystal glasses, place cards, printed in gold. Then the toasts began. Camille's father spoke first. Poised, effortless. A few jokes about Michael. A glowing tribute to his daughter. Not a single mention of me. A bridesmaid followed. Then a college friend. Polished. Polite. And then the DJ adjusted his mic. If the groom's mother would like to say a few words, everything paused. Forks clinked. Heads turned. I stood. Slowly. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just firm. I didn't take the mic. I didn't need it. I wasn't on the guest list, I said. But I was the reason this home stood. The wind shifted slightly. I gave this boy a life. I gave him this ground. And I will not be edited out. No tears came. No tremble in my voice. Only truth. Stripped of apology. I looked at Michael. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted away. I looked at Camille. She froze, no smile this time. Then I nodded once. And sat. No applause. Just silence. The kind that doesn't vanish. The kind that lingers like thunder in a church. By nightfall, the celebration had thinned to a quiet hum. The music softened. Guests filtered out in slow trickles, heels in hand. Jackets draped over shoulders. Polite hugs at the end of curated conversations. The caterers had started clearing plates. Someone was gathering half-empty wine glasses and folding up the lavender napkins that had been so carefully arranged. Camille didn't come near me. She floated around the porch like a ghost dressed in silk, smiling too wide, hands too busy. Every time our eyes almost met, she turned away. Fine, let her. Michael, though he came to me just before they left. No jacket. Tie undone. Eyes tired. Mom, he said, like a word he hadn't spoken aloud in a while. I didn't offer a hug. Instead, I pulled a small folded envelope from my bag. Handwritten. Unsealed. Not for today, I told him, placing it gently in his palm. For when the speeches stop. He didn't ask what it said, just nodded and slipped it into his pocket, like a weight he'd forgotten he was supposed to carry. I said nothing more. Neither did he. After they drove off, I waited for the house to still completely. The moon had risen, pale and heavy, over the lake. The porch creaked under my steps, like it remembered me. In my hands, I held a sapling, a lilac bush I'd brought from the garden center, 2 towns over. Not the same species as the one Camille had torn out when they repainted the porch. This one bloomed smaller, slower, less dramatic, more stubborn. I planted it off to the left of the porch, just beyond where the old roots had been pulled. The soil was soft, loose from the week's earlier rain. My fingers sank into the earth without protest. And as I pressed it in hands dirty, knees stiff, I whispered to the wind, "It's not the same, and it's not supposed to be." Later, inside, I wiped the dirt from under my nails and climbed the stairs with a steady breath. The framed deed sat waiting on the hallway table. I hung it just above the coat hooks. Not out of pride, out of memory, out of fact. Let them host their gatherings. Let them rewrite the guest lists. The truth now had its place on the wall. Its weight, on paper. Its silence, undeniable. They thought silence meant surrender, but silence is just where I gather my strength. Let them learn. There's a point in life, often later than we expect, when we realize that being quiet doesn't mean we were ever invisible. For years, I believed that staying silent was the dignified choice, that shrinking myself was the way to keep peace, to stay included. But silence, when mistaken for absence, becomes erasure. And I've learned that reclaiming your place doesn't have to look like a fight. It can look like showing up, holding your ground, and reminding the world that you still matter. We, the mothers, grandmothers, and women who raised homes from empty rooms, are not side notes. We are the authors of history our families walk on. So speak. Even if your voice is soft, even if your hands shake. You don't need to shout to be heard. You only need to stop apologizing for existing. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been left out of your own life's celebration, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet strength of women like us. The next one might just remind you of yourself.